the United States created in its own self-interest in the decades after World War II have been weakened, in no small part by the very hand that created them, albeit by a president unlike any other. At home, our government is polarized, paralyzed, and seemingly incapable of addressing the manifold problems facing the country. How did our country go so quickly from unique global power to a country that is widely perceived as no longer willing to bear the costs or accept the responsibility of global leadership, or even capable of governing itself effectively? Answering how we got to where we are today internationally requires understanding the multiple forms of power that contributed to our achievement of historical singularity, and our earlier leaders' skill in using those many and diverse forms of power along the road to that high point. The answer lies also in the mistakes of post-Cold War presidents and Congresses and, in particular, their failure to recognize, resource, and use the arsenal of non-military assets that proved of critical importance in the long contest with the Soviet Union. It lies as well in their failure to understand that our place in the world in the decades ahead will depend for certain on a strong military, but also on reimagining and rebuilding those non-military tools. The answer is essentially the failure of too many of our recent political leaders to understand the complexity of American power, both in its expansiveness and in its limitations. Dwight D. Eisenhower became president on January 20, 1953. During his 2 terms, the Soviet Union acquired the hydrogen bomb. There were repeated crises with China over Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait. The Joint Chiefs of Staff twice recommended using nuclear weapons, once to help the French at Dien Bien Phu, and once against the Chinese. There was a major war in the Middle East involving 3 of our closest allies, Britain, France, and Israel. There were revolutions in Soviet-dominated East Germany, Poland, and Hungary, a revolution in Cuba, and many lesser crises. The period was one of great tension in the Cold War with the Soviets, and yet, from the moment Eisenhower signed the Armistice Agreement ending the Korean War in July 1953 until he left office in January 1961, not one American soldier was killed in combat. American prestige stood high around the world. How did he manage that feat? Eisenhower was the only post-World War II president who was a career military officer, a 5-star general who became commander-in-chief. He brought to the presidency great personal strengths, strategic insight, and leadership skills. He understood the uncertainties and risks always attendant to military operations. He knew the limits of military power in the nuclear age. He had the experience and confidence and rank to tell his generals no. Above all, he grasped the importance of diplomacy, economics, communication, and the many other tools of influence. He understood and wielded power in all its dimensions. Ronald Reagan was routinely underestimated. Yet as the Soviet Union began to falter internally in the 1980s, Reagan effectively used every instrument of American power to push the Soviets over the edge, from crisis to collapse. Upon taking office, he began the largest American military buildup in decades. He mobilized the CIA to covertly challenge Soviet adventurism and activities around the world, arming foes of Cuba, which acted as a surrogate for the USSR, and Angola, Ethiopia, and Central America. Challenged the Soviets directly in Afghanistan by arming the Mujahideen, and supported anti-communist movements such as Solidarity in Poland. Reagan brought economic pressure to bear on the USSR through sanctions and unprecedentedly aggressive efforts to block its acquisition of Western technology and know-how that might assist their weapons programs and their economy. Not since Eisenhower's and Kennedy's time did the United States Information Agency and its many channels of communication have such strong presidential support in sending America's message abroad, a message about the United States and what it stood for, and blunt talk about Soviet tyranny. Reagan also understood the importance of diplomacy, and so in 1984 and 85, he pivoted, offering an outreach